So this is part 2 of the series I'm calling What Exactly is 5D and How Do We Get There? In part 1, I first of all discussed what the term 5D generally indicates based on many ancient and modern spiritual texts and also on what's been passed down orally through the ages by indigenous cultures. I described what 5D reality will be like once the Earth and humanity make the shift into the fifth dimension, which, according to a number of sources, will likely take place at some time in the near future. I also described how consciousness creates reality, how 3D consciousness has created the 3D reality we live in at this point, and how our shifting into 5D consciousness will create 5D reality. I proceeded then to describe the most obvious aspects of 3D consciousness that we can all get caught in and that hold us back from evolving into 5D. And these are important to be aware of because we can then more quickly shift these 3D patterns we have and begin functioning more out of 5D consciousness. And once we do this, our personal reality then begins vibrating at the frequency of 5D to match it, more like the one we'll be living in when the Earth shifts into 5D. In other words, we can actually begin living in our own personal 5D reality now, even before the Earth and the rest of humanity make the final shift, even while the external world is still in total upheaval and chaos. We can discover that our consciousness creates our own reality. So now I will begin describing here important aspects of 5D consciousness so you can recognize them and understand how to experience them more often within yourself. In hearing them, you may realize that your experiences are somewhat different, and that's of course to be expected. We're all different in our ascension process, and we're all unique beings. But perhaps these experiences I describe will spark a greater recognition in you about your own experiences. But first, you may be wondering why I'm not addressing the subject of 4D consciousness. A lot of people don't even talk about this, but let me briefly describe it. In a nutshell, 4D consciousness is a state of being that is somewhere in between 3D and 5D consciousness. And when functioning from within it, you're generally slipping kind of back and forth between these two states of consciousness. For this reason, trying to navigate life while in 4D consciousness can be very confusing and disorienting. I think we can all relate to this. It's what most of us are experiencing during these transitional times. But I can add this. In 4D consciousness, your vibration is higher than when you're, fully identified with 3D consciousness. So in certain ways, you're not so reactive and emotional as you used to be, and you're more spiritually aware more of the time. You don't get quite so triggered as before, or at least for as long when you do. However, you're essentially still identified with your body and your mind and your emotions, and you're probably still believing you're someone who needs to heal and fix yourself in order to grow and to ascend. And this is okay. This is appropriate for these times when you're aware of intense, low-frequency patterns that are weighing you down and holding you back. In fact, a hallmark, I think, of 4D consciousness these days seems to be the experience of old traumatic experiences and identities suddenly resurfacing, sometimes in the most confusing way after many years of being buried in the subconscious mind. Painful emotions often accompany these old experiences. And as uncomfortable and sometimes even frightening as some of these experiences can be, it's important to remember that when this is happening, it's a sign that these old memories and all the traumas and negative emotions involved in them are in the process of releasing. They can't go with you as you continue to ascend into a higher frequency. And sometimes as this is happening, old physical ailments will also reappear for a while. In addition, at times when in 4D consciousness, you may experience periods in which you feel very empty, like no one's home inside you. You may feel as if you don't know yourself anymore. You don't recognize yourself. So much of what used to engage and excite you has now essentially just disappeared. You're living in a type of void or a blank landscape. And this is because a lot of the patterns and identities you developed while living in 3D consciousness are now in the process of leaving. And your new identity, your new 5D identity, hasn't quite shown up yet on a steady basis. So 4D consciousness is definitely a complex and really weird state of being to have to live with. And it's important to realize then that 5D consciousness is a big leap up from this kind of state. And yet, you may realize you are sometimes experiencing 5D consciousness these days more often than you've thought. So let's explore some of these main characteristics of this identification to give you a clearer idea of what it is, and maybe you'll recognize it. The first thing I gotta say is that, as with many spiritual concepts, it's extremely difficult to describe in words what the 5D self is. The direct experience of this very ethereal self is so far beyond what the rational mind can comprehend that words can't truly express its true nature. Yet, they can sometimes point to the experience and ignite the recognition of it within you. So hopefully the words I use here to describe it will help do this for you. So let me start with this. First of all, your 5D self is something that has very little to do with what you do, what you feel, or what you think. It's something that you simply are. In fact, it is so natural, so familiar in a way that it could be easy to miss. It's closer to you than your breath, closer than your thoughts. It's that most subtle essence that animates your body, that gives it life. It's the awareness inside you that has never changed, no matter how much older your body has gotten or how mature your personality has become. It was the same when you were a child, as a young adult, and all other ages throughout your life. It has never been born. It will never die. It is changeless, eternal, permanent beingness. You get the sense of this. Another way to describe it might be that it is that stillness deep inside you. It's clear, pristine, untouched, quiet, serene, luminescent silence. It's the presence of fathomless love and profound joy, boundless freedom. You can fall endlessly into its blissful depths. And at the same time, this self is multidimensional. At times, you might experience yourself as an individual aspect of Source, somehow connected to the denser form of a physical body, but free and in charge of it. You're an energetic field of consciousness, or perhaps a field of pure light, or maybe a field of pure love, or simply pure awareness. And as this energetic field, you're aware of how emotions and thoughts and fluctuating identities all flow around inside of you. They come and they go. You may also be aware of how large you are. That your physical body is actually inside of you. As this energetic field, you flow through your body and exist all around it as a much larger being. In fact, all your energy bodies are inside of you as this field of consciousness. And then, at other times, you may experience that rather than an individual energetic form, you are vast, formless intelligence, a pure consciousness that permeates all of reality. You have no particular form or shape or size. You exist everywhere, in everything. You are the trees, the sky, the mountains. There's nothing that is not you. Everything in life, from the most dense level of matter to the most subtle level of energy, exists within and as you. And with this, there's an expansive sense of freedom, a knowing of the vastness of yourself, an immense spaciousness. You know yourself to be the very life force itself. So your 5D self is not a static identity in any way. It's extremely fluid, ever changing, ever evolving in every moment. And you can experience it in a variety of ways. And yet, paradoxically, there also is a constant, eternal quality to it that is changeless. And what is really interesting is that when you tap into this self, you immediately recognize it. Although in one way it feels brand new, in another it's deeply familiar to you. You may even recognize it as something you once knew yourself to be in the long ago past, but have been out of touch with it, perhaps for eons of time while you've lived in 3D. And yet, as deeply familiar as it is, the initial experience of it can be so powerful, it can stun you. It's like a mask has suddenly been slipped off your eyes and you can see reality for the first time. and a huge smile may suddenly light up your face. You have likely, on certain occasions, tuned into this higher dimensional self that you are. Perhaps you've been aware of it and have had profound experiences that have left a deep impression on you. Or maybe you're just beginning to experience it lately, since ascension has begun. It can suddenly appear for just a few moments and then fade, or it may stay for a while. But either way, you may have the knowing that you are closer than ever to merging with this primal essence of who you are. And you may long for it with a deep ache in your being. Now, there are a number of practices you can learn to discover and experience this deep, primal, luminescent essence of who you are. If you studied with spiritual teachers and followed techniques they've taught, perhaps you've gotten at least glimpses of it. But there's one very simple thing you can try doing, and it's this. Pull your attention back inside your head, behind your eyes, and then look out at the world from behind your eyes. Now, you may think you already do this naturally all the time, that this is where your sense of self resides, kind of inside your head. But you might be surprised. Most of the time, you're likely pulled out in front of your body a bit. Your mental and emotional bodies do extend out from your physical body a ways, and you probably spend a lot of time out in those bodies. So if you pay attention, you can become aware of this and pull your focus back into your head, behind your eyes, and then maybe shift your awareness up a couple of inches, and you'll suddenly feel a shift. There's a sudden sense of power you can feel, and an awareness of yourself as an energy field when you do this, rather than a dense body. Now, this doesn't guarantee that you'll suddenly be in 5D consciousness, but it can be a step toward it, toward experiencing yourself as a field of eternal light that exists in a higher dimension than you're usually aware of living in. And you can become aware of that, and that as this field, you're an extension of Source itself. At any rate, let's look back at what it might be like when you are fully embodied in 5D consciousness, even if it's just for a short period of time, to see if you can recognize it. When you are fully anchored in this higher consciousness, your identification is as the clear, eternal essence of Source. You're totally aware that you are this essence. It's not just an intellectual understanding. It's an experience of it, the full knowing and living of it. And although you know yourself to be this ethereal energy body, at the same time, you're also aware that there is a physical body with you that has emotional, mental, and spiritual layers with it. There's the awareness that as this essence, you have extended part of yourself into a lower, denser dimension to have an experience in human form on Earth at this point. And although you are focused almost all the time on this human form and your experiences with it, there's the awareness that this form is just one small part of you. And as the self, you can also experience a profound knowing of your oneness with all people, with all of existence. You feel no sense of separation or duality. You're just one with all of creation. There is no judgment, no divisiveness or feeling of being against anyone or anything. You simply have your own knowing and your own ideas and conclusions you've come to about subjects that other people may be arguing about, but there's no attachment to them. You're more aware of your connection to all people and the sense that in certain ways you are everyone. You're not just connected to them. And somehow, with this knowing, you can also experience a sense of great power. You know yourself to be a completely sovereign being. Your presence is commanding, and yet gracious and respectful. You easily speak your truth when you need to. And you can sometimes experience yourself as a very large presence of energy that can fill an entire room. Have you ever experienced any of this? Maybe even just for a moment? So that's kind of a general idea of what it can be like to be fully identified with your 5D self. But now let's look at what your mood and emotions might be like. The most prominent thing you might notice is that you experience a freedom from all emotional suffering, all lack, and all limitation. There's a sense of natural well-being you feel, no matter what's occurring. There's no anxious need to feel or think or act in a way that's not natural or authentic for you. You have a knowing that emotions and thoughts are like the weather. They come and they go. And when they arise, you feel them and you may express them, but they generally just kind of pass through you. There's no need to follow them or attach to them or create a story around them. At times you might experience a period of intense bliss or joy or love or maybe gratitude. But generally your mood is just likely to be peaceful, happy, balanced, optimistic. There's often a sense of what could just be called quiet bliss. And very importantly, this state of being is not dependent on any outer circumstances or events or relationships. It's just there as a natural, basic, default mood. The chattering monkey mind is gone, leaving you with a feeling of just clear spaciousness in your mind. Maybe with some exciting creative ideas passing through that you might want to follow. But there's no annoying, busy mind chatter. That's very 3D. And because of this, there's a sense of exhilarating inner freedom that you experience. Also, there's an easy acceptance of what is. No intense longing, no strong desire for anything to be different from how it is. The constant annoying dissatisfaction that has always been present in your 3D or 4D consciousness, usually on a subconscious level, is just completely gone. Whatever is happening in your life is just fine. And there's a curiosity about whatever may be next, even an anticipation knowing that it's probably going to be interesting and engaging. Another thing that you're aware of when you're in 5D consciousness is that at the core of this consciousness, there's an expansion and openness of your heart, an outpouring of love from your whole being. There's a feeling of compassion and emotional receptivity, and just a flowing of love toward all you encounter and for all of life, including, of course, yourself. There's an absence of judgment or feeling of separation. The love you feel for people has no attachment with it. It's a clear, somewhat more detached type of love that you may be familiar with no strings attached, no expectations or demands. And you're also very aware that you are allowing your inner guidance that is emanating from your heart to make decisions for you in your life. It's no longer your rational mind that guides you in all your decisions and actions. It's your heart. And this is very different from how people tend to function in 3D consciousness, where there may sometimes be a kind of reliance on intuition or gut feelings for certain things. But generally, it's the rational mind they use to guide them. In 5D consciousness, you find that your heart is a much better aspect of yourself to use in making decisions in your life, especially the important ones. Now, what can also be very striking when you're in 5D consciousness is how different your relationships become. In them, you feel no need to receive approval or love or connection from other people. If they offer you these things, it's a bonus, an overflow that's very much appreciated and valued. But you have no need to receive these things from anyone in order to feel lovable or valuable or important. You have no expectations or demands on people to meet your needs in this way. Instead, all your emotional needs are met by your own self-love and your knowing of your own inherent value. And, very importantly, your love for others springs solely from your true caring and compassion for them, not from a need that they provide you with something in return. No longer is your love for others conditional on some sort of bargain. It's unconditional, free of demands or expectations that a person act in a certain way or be something different from who they are. This is so different from the usual 3D relationships people tend to have, isn't it? Your relationships, therefore, tend to be harmonious and peaceful and loving with effective communication. And when there are miscommunications, it's relatively easy to work them through because you're being authentic about your own feelings and desires and thoughts and fully loving and supportive of yourself, and yet you're also being compassionate and honestly interested in what the other person is feeling and trying to communicate as well. And you're talking it all through. And in relating to people like this, you find that people who function in a low vibration and are caught in third dimensional fears and other emotions may be drawn to you at times in order to receive energy that will be helpful to them, but you don't generally attract them to you in your life much anymore. It's an interesting thing to note. So another thing you can notice when you're in 5D consciousness is that you really don't have any limitations in creating what is necessary for you. You realize that when you're feeling identified with your 3D self, you can often feel caught in the limitations of what your rational mind thinks is possible. The limitations you believe you see in 3D can seem fixed, and there's little, if any, belief that you can get around them. But when functioning from within 5D consciousness, you understand that what might seem impossible is actually quite possible. You realize that there are actually no limitations on what you can create or bring to yourself so long as what you wish to do doesn't cause harm. And of course, you don't want to do this, so no problem. You know that if necessary, the impossible will occur, and it'll feel natural to you. Actual miracles can happen. It's just how reality works when you're in this higher dimensional consciousness. Everything you need just seems to flow to you without you having to do much of anything at all. At times when you're really tuned into this higher frequency, things will suddenly just start coming into your life so quickly from so many different sources, you can hardly catch your breath. Things you didn't even realize you needed are suddenly available to you. And they're usually just offered or given to you. They don't even require a money exchange. And you can also realize that you have things or energies or gifts that you can offer in return that the people giving you things might have need of. It's magical and delightful to experience this process in which you can see your needs and desires just being taken care of. Now, another interesting thing you can begin to notice when you're in 5D consciousness is that because you experience yourself as a multi-dimensional being, you can become aware of living in a number of different dimensions. You realize that the human being part of you is just one of your experiences. In a way, you're living in multiple lives. When you're focused on that part of yourself that's a human being, you realize there are other higher dimensional selves that have always been with you. Aspects of yourself you've not been consciously in touch with for a long, long time, but now you are again. As a part of you, these selves are like extensions of yourself that have been dwelling in higher dimensions, even in dimensions higher than the fifth, and that they have been guiding you all along in your life as you've been in this lower, more challenging dimension. In third or fourth dimensional consciousness, you may have been referring to them simply as your higher self, not realizing that they are actually multiple aspects of yourself living in different dimensions. Or perhaps you've assumed they were your guides, but you realize now they've actually been a part of you. Now you do also have guides, other beings who are helping you, But there are also these other multiple aspects of yourself that have been helping to guide you as well. Now, I know this can be kind of hard for the rational mind to grasp. I'm doing my best to describe this, and I apologize if this is confusing. But perhaps you can just kind of grok it, as some of us used to say. Just get it with your gut rather than your mind, because it's really an interesting awareness that can come to you. At any rate, perhaps one of the most dominant and pleasurable things you can also notice when you're living in 5D consciousness is that your focus is often on exploring and creating new experiences and adventures. You find you love learning and expanding your awareness. And even with the smallest things you discover or experience, you can feel a sense of wonder and excitement. You notice things you never noticed before. There's somehow more ability and time to do this, probably due to the lack of clutter and stress in your mind. And you're just basically enjoying your life that's filled with joy and peace and freedom and a sense of fulfillment. And this, of course, is very different from your experience in 3D consciousness. Gone is any irritating dissatisfaction with your life. There's no more waiting for something better to happen. So in general, when living in 5D consciousness, there's a buoyant optimism about life, a feeling of being totally alive and aware. You're confident that whatever is ahead for you is just going to be wonderful, intriguing, delightful, because that's simply the way life is for you. Now, I do have to say something here, though. Especially if you're someone who believes that all you need to do in your ascension process is to focus on your consciousness as it ascends and stay in the frequencies of love and light, and that if you do this, you will be free to continue your life in peace and comfort and continue to ascend. Now, focusing on love and light is, of course, important. They're high-frequency experiences. However, during these times that we're currently living through, it's important to not get lost in the belief that this is all that is necessary in order to move through your ascension process into 5D. It is true that when you are fully immersed in 5D consciousness on a constant basis, you have total trust in the benevolence of Source. You're aware that there are malevolent forces still at play out in the world, but you feel basically safe from them because you know you're existing in a higher dimension, a higher bandwidth of consciousness from them. However, during these times we're now in, unless you are fully established in 5D consciousness, it is still important to stay aware and alert to these negative forces. They are currently increasing in their negative thrusts to bring humanity down because they know their time is up. They can't go with us into 5D. If this information is new to you, I described these forces at length in my recent YouTube called Questioning New Age Teachings. So you can get more information there if you want. But I want to say, I'm not encouraging you to become fearful or stressed out about this, or saying you should become involved in following politics or in diving down into all the rabbit holes of disclosure that multiple independent journalists are putting out there these days, or those journalists who talk at length about dark galactic energies, unless, of course, you happen to be inwardly called to do any of this. I'm just encouraging you to remain aware and alert to what may be happening in the external world around you at this point, especially locally, that may impact you in your life. We're now moving into some of the darkest times we will be living through. So stay realistic and grounded. Just staying focused on love and light may not be enough to keep you steady on course in your ascension process. So I think we could say that ascension is a two-pronged process. On the one hand, you want to stay focused on being as positive and optimistic as possible, knowing we are on a positive timeline now, because we are. And this makes it all the more important, of course, to focus on staying in 5D consciousness as much as you can, because if you can, you will be guided to what you need to do should any kind of danger, especially to your survival or to your freedom as a sovereign being, comes your way. You'll know with certainty that all you need to know will be given to you in right timing, and manifestation, when needed, will become natural and very rapid. And yet, on the other hand, you probably want to make this journey toward 5D as quickly and safely as possible. So you need to also stay aware of what is happening out in the world, as well as be prepared to make decisions that are realistic and best for you in whatever circumstance you're in. In other words, you need to stay fully embodied, in touch with what is occurring in the world, as well as in tune with your 5D consciousness. And the other thing I want to say here is that in presenting these ideas about 5D consciousness, I'm not saying that it's especially easy to make this shift. And I'm not encouraging you to ever judge yourself for the times you find yourself falling into low frequency patterns and emotions that could be called 3D consciousness. This can be a mistake when you become aware that you've kind of fallen asleep again and you're back in lower consciousness. It's all too easy to find yourself in 3D consciousness during these challenging times we're currently going through. It's important to simply notice when you've done this, when you've fallen into feeling fear or anxiety or whatever, and not rush to try to immediately change your thoughts or emotions. It's best to simply note what has happened. You've temporarily gotten caught in a lower frequency. And just be with yourself for a bit, feeling compassion and understanding for what you're experiencing. Don't make the emotions wrong or try to stuff them down inside of you, or even try to immediately heal them. If you can just be with yourself, gentle and allowing, you'll find that your lower density state of consciousness will gradually fade and diminish in intensity. And then you will be able to begin a process of shifting your awareness into a higher frequency of consciousness again, either through a healing practice you know, or through just letting it release. You know, one of the emotions that can really come up if you have experienced 5D consciousness is frustration. It can be so frustrating to have these high frequency experiences and feel the elation of the inherent freedom and joy in them, but then somehow not be able to hold on to them, right? You don't know why, but somehow your everyday life tends to pull you back into 3D or 4D consciousness. And for this reason, I am planning future YouTubes in which I will present further ways to help you better recognize 5D consciousness when it appears, and how to prolong the glimpses and experiences you do have of it. And then I will discuss how to more fully let go of aspects of your 3D identification to help you to eventually begin living your life more and more easily and fully as your 5D self. But for now, maybe it's enough to just take in all I've presented here and hopefully better understand the shift in consciousness that you are in the process of making. Perhaps you can try to describe for yourself in your own words what this monumental shift is like for you. With greater awareness about your own experiences of 5D consciousness, you can begin seeing that your life is changing to match this higher consciousness. You can begin to see the magical synchronicities and the miracles, those things that are already happening for you. And you'll also begin to have the experience that more of you is coming online. More of your higher consciousness is with you now, actually anchoring into your body. Although you may still be in the process of releasing old third-dimensional patterns and traumas and ancestral karma, something most of us are fully engaged in these days, you will likely begin to also have more and more experiences of life in the ways I've described here. And these experiences will keep you going even amidst all the chaos and disruption that will continue on in the world for some time yet. You can stay aware of it all and navigate it, find your way through it as you must. But meanwhile, you can also have more and more glimpses of how life will eventually be for you, full-time, free and delightful and peaceful. And you can know that if you focus on doing this, you're not only enjoying your own life more, you're actually helping to speed up the ascension of the human collective as a whole as well. You are connected to everybody, and you're making a difference in the world. Your joy and sense of well-being are affecting everyone, making the shift into 5D consciousness. So as always, I encourage you to just keep going on, finding your way through the fourth dimensional madness in the world, and learning how to fully enjoy your life despite it all. And for now, I send you much love and many blessings.